The night air was unusually still, and the quiet hum of the city had died down earlier than usual. It was as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something unspoken. Evelyn Hart stood at the tall glass window of her apartment, gazing at the moonlit streets below. Her reflection, pale and weary, stared back at her. She had always been a night person, often drawing inspiration from darkness for her compositions. A classically trained pianist, Evelyn was working on her magnum opus, an orchestral piece she called Nocturne. It was meant to embody the beauty and terror of the night. But as the weeks passed, Evelyn began to sense something sinister woven into her music, as if the notes themselves whispered in a language older than time. She pressed the piano keys slowly, testing a melody that had haunted her dreams. The sound seemed to linger unnaturally in the air, vibrating against her chest like an invisible hand. The first time she played it, her neighbors complained of hearing strange sounds, low moans, like wind through a graveyard, or voices whispering behind the walls. Evelyn laughed it off, attributing it to acoustics, but the unease never left her. Now, as she pressed another chord, she swore she heard a woman's voice sigh in the corner of the room. Evelyn spun around, but nothing was there. Her cat, Dorian, arched his back and hissed, glaring at the darkened hallway that led to her bedroom. The hallway seemed impossibly long in that moment, swallowing the dim light spilling from the lamp. Evelyn's hands trembled, but she forced herself back to the piano. She was close, so close to finishing Nocturne. The melody had consumed her life, her thoughts, her dreams. She had canceled concerts, ignored friends, and even stopped answering her mother's calls. None of it mattered now. Only the music did. That night, she played until her fingers bled. She didn't notice at first. The blood mingled with the ivory keys, staining them a pale crimson. But when the clock struck 3, every light in the apartment flickered and went out. The piano's final note resonated long after her hands had stilled. In the dark, she heard applause, soft, mocking, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Her heart hammered in her chest. She whispered into the void, "Who's there?" The silence that followed was heavier than sound. Then, a voice answered, low, melodic, almost tender. "You've awakened me." Evelyn froze. Awakened who? The one who listens when the world sleeps. The one hidden in the silence between your notes. Keep playing, Evelyn. Her stomach twisted in terror. She knew no one was in the apartment, yet she felt a presence circling her. Her cat darted under the couch, its green eyes wide with fear. Evelyn wanted to run, but something deeper, some obsession, urged her to obey. She sat down and played again. The music flowed effortlessly, as though her hands were guided by invisible forces. She wept while she played, each chord dragging her further into despair. Images flashed in her mind, faceless figures standing in graveyards, hollow-eyed children humming lullabies, a shadow stretching across endless corridors. When she stopped, the voice whispered again, "Good. Soon it will be complete." Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of the room, staring at the piano. The blood had dried on the keys, and the silence of the apartment pressed against her like a suffocating weight. She thought of calling her friend Clara, a fellow musician, but what could she say? That her piano was haunted? That music itself was devouring her sanity? She feared Clara would think she had gone mad. The next day, she forced herself out into the city. She hoped the bustle of people, the chatter of voices, would drown out the memory of the voice. But even in daylight, she heard faint whispers, like echoes of her nocturne hidden in the noise of the world. When she passed a street performer playing violin, the melody twisted into the same haunting phrase she had dreamed. The violinist stopped abruptly, his face pale, as though realizing he had played something forbidden. By the time Evelyn returned home, exhaustion had clawed into her bones. She thought she'd collapse into sleep, but when she shut her eyes, she found herself standing in a vast black hall. Marble floors reflected candlelight, and shadows clung to the walls like living things. At the far end of the hall stood a figure cloaked in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She knew instinctively that this was the one who had been whispering to her. "You've composed well," the figure said, its voice like silk on stone. "One final note, and the gate opens." "What gate?" Evelyn whispered. "To me. To eternity." When she awoke, her hands were already on the piano keys, the melody pouring from her as if she had never left the dream. Her neighbors banged on the walls, shouting for her to stop, but she couldn't. The shadows in her apartment thickened, stretching longer than they should, pooling like ink at her feet. Her cat was nowhere to be seen. Evelyn's tears streamed freely as she begged the voice to leave her. But the voice only urged her on. Play. Play until the night sings. Days blurred into nights. Evelyn lost all sense of time. She barely ate, barely drank. The phone rang endlessly, her mother, Clara, her agent, all ignored. She was no longer Evelyn Hart, pianist. She was nothing but the vessel for Nocturne. On the 7th night, as the clock struck midnight, Evelyn reached the final passage. Her hands shook violently, but she pressed each key with precision. The melody rose like a storm, swelling, crashing, twisting. The apartment walls groaned as though the building itself were alive. And then, as the last note echoed, the shadows peeled from the walls, rising into grotesque forms, tall, eyeless, grinning. They clapped, a sound like bones breaking. The hooded figure appeared behind her, resting a cold hand on her shoulder. "You have opened the gate," Evelyn screamed as the room split apart, revealing an abyss beneath her floor. The figures leapt into the chasm, laughing, dragging her with them. Her last vision was of the piano, burning in spectral fire, the keys melting into a river of blood. When her neighbors finally broke into the apartment the next morning, they found the piano destroyed, the room scorched black. Evelyn was gone. Only a sheet of music remained, untouched by the fire. Written across it, in Evelyn's own hand, was the complete Nocturne. Those who looked at the notes swore they could hear faint whispers, and some claimed the melody etched itself into their minds, driving them to madness. The police closed the case as a disappearance, but the story of Evelyn Hart spread among musicians. Some tried to play Nocturne. None of them ever finished it. And on nights when the moon is full and the streets are silent, a piano can sometimes be heard in the distance, playing Evelyn's cursed masterpiece, a Nocturne that never ends.